Hello and welcome to Fairy Tale Nights, where we bring you enchanting bedtime stories to help you drift away into peaceful sleep. I'm so glad you've joined us tonight, and I hope you're ready to relax and escape into a magical world. Tonight's story is called The Mirror of the Moon. It's a soothing tale about an old man named Elias, who discovers a mysterious mirror in his garden on a moonlit night. The mirror leads him on a serene journey into a mystical forest where he finds something more than he ever imagined, a sense of peace and acceptance. It's the perfect story to let go of the day's worries and slip into a dreamy, restful night. Before we begin, I invite you to get comfortable. Snuggle under your blanket, take a deep breath, and let the calming magic of this tale carry you away. And if you enjoy our stories, please consider subscribing to Fairy Tale Nights. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue sharing these peaceful stories with you. Thank you so much for being here. And now, let's begin our journey together. In a deep and tranquil valley, far away from the world of men, there lived an old man named Elias. His cottage, simple but well kept, lay nestled at the edge of a vast ancient forest. The valley, wrapped in the quiet embrace of towering mountains, was a place where time seemed to slow, and the passage of the days was marked only by the soft shifting of light through the trees. Elias had lived many lives before coming to this secluded place. In his youth, he had been a traveler, his feet wandering across distant lands, his heart driven by an insatiable curiosity. He had seen the grand cities of men, the towering spires of distant kingdoms, and the endless stretches of desert where the wind sang songs of ages long past. But as the years slipped away, so too did his hunger for adventure. Slowly, he began to seek quieter things, the soft whisper of leaves in the wind, the gentle flow of rivers, and the peace that only solitude could offer. And so, many years ago, Elias had chosen the valley as his home. Here, the world seemed at peace, and the endless march of time felt softer, more forgiving. Each morning, he would wake with the first light of dawn, the sun casting golden rays over the misty peaks of the mountains. He would tend to a small garden, repairing his cottage or walking the narrow paths that wound through the woods. In the afternoons, he would sit by the river that flowed lazily through the valley, watching the water as it made its slow journey to the distant sea. Elias had grown used to this quiet rhythm, his days blending together in a peaceful, dreamlike procession. There were no grand moments, no urgent tasks, just the slow unfolding of time and the quiet contentment that came from living in harmony with the world around him. The forest, with its towering trees and ever-present stillness, had become his constant companion, and he had come to know its paths as intimately as the lines on his own hands. But while the valley was a place of peace, it was not without its mysteries. The forest, in particular, held secrets that Elias had never fully understood. There were times, in the deep hours of the night, when the trees seemed to whisper to one another in voices too soft to hear. The moonlight, when it filtered through the canopy of leaves, would cast strange, shimmering patterns on the forest floor, as though the very air was alive with magic. Elias had learned to accept these oddities as part of the valley's charm, though he had never sought to understand them. It was on one such night, when the moon hung high in the sky, full and bright, that Elias first discovered the mirror. The evening had begun like any other. Elias had finished his supper and was sitting outside his cottage, watching as the last of the daylight faded from the sky. The moon had already risen, casting its soft silver light over the valley. The air was cool, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind brought with it a sense of calm. Elias, feeling content, closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the forest lull him into a quiet reverie. But then something caught his eye, a faint glimmer, a shimmer of light that seemed to come from the center of his garden. It was a subtle thing, barely noticeable at first, but as Elias opened his eyes and focused on it, the glimmer grew more pronounced. It was as though the earth itself was reflecting the moonlight, but in a way that was sharper, clearer, more intense. Curiosity stirred within him. Elias rose from his seat and walked slowly toward the source of the light. The grass was soft beneath his feet, and the cool air brushed against his skin as he approached the center of his garden. There, in the moonlight, he saw it, a mirror. It lay flat against the ground, perfectly circular, and large enough that Elias could have stood inside it. Its surface was smooth, polished to such a degree that it seemed more like a pool of still water than glass. The moon was reflected in it so perfectly that for a moment, Elias thought he was looking at another sky, as though the earth itself had opened to reveal a second world below. Kneeling down, Elias reached out and touched the surface of the mirror. It was cool to the touch, like stone that had been left in the shade, but there was something else, an energy, a subtle hum that seemed to pulse just beneath the surface. He withdrew his hand, a shiver running through him, though whether from excitement or trepidation, he could not say. As he stared into the mirror, something extraordinary began to happen. The reflection of the moon in the mirror seemed to ripple, as though the glass were not solid but liquid. The image shifted, the perfect reflection distorting and changing, until it no longer showed the moonlit sky above, but something entirely different. Elias blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. The reflection in the mirror now showed a forest, one that looked remarkably like the one that surrounded his home, but not quite the same. The trees in the mirror were taller, their leaves shimmering with a silvery glow that seemed to pulse with the light of the moon. The air in the reflection was different too, thicker, almost tangible, as though it were filled with magic. And then, in the center of the reflection, Elias saw a path. It wound its way through the trees, disappearing into the depths of the forest. There was something about the path that called to him, a gentle tug at his heart, urging him to follow it. Without thinking, Elias reached out toward the mirror once more. This time, when his fingers brushed the surface, it gave way beneath his touch, rippling like water. Before he could pull back, the mirror seemed to pull him in, gently but irresistibly, like a current drawing him into a deep river. The world around him blurred, and for a moment, Elias felt weightless, suspended between waking and dreaming. When his vision cleared, Elias found himself standing in the very forest he had seen in the mirror. trees towered above him, their trunks thick and gnarled with age, their branches heavy with silver leaves that shimmered in the moonlight. The air was cool and still, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze. Though the forest was unfamiliar, Elias felt no fear. There was a strange sense of peace here, a deep stillness that resonated with something within him. The path that he had seen in the mirror stretched out before him, winding its way through the trees and disappearing into the distance. It was the same path, the one that had called to him, and now that he stood before it, Elias knew with a quiet certainty that he was meant to follow it. And so, without hesitation, he began to walk. The forest was unlike any place Elias had ever seen. The trees, though familiar in form, were touched by a kind of magic that made them seem otherworldly. Their leaves shimmered in the moonlight, not with the pale green of the trees in his own world, but with a soft, silvery glow that seemed to shift and dance as the wind moved through the branches. The ground beneath his feet was soft, covered in a thick layer of moss that felt like walking on a cushion of air. And the air, oh, the air was cool and sweet, filled with the scent of earth and rain and something elusive and ancient, like the memory of a dream. As Elias walked, his mind wandered. He thought of the mirror, of how it had appeared so suddenly in his garden, and of the forest it had led him to. He wondered if this place was real, or if it was some kind of dream, a creation of his own mind. But as he walked, the forest around him felt too solid, too vivid to be a dream. The air was cool against his skin, the moss soft beneath his feet, and the light of the moon so clear and bright that he could see every detail of the trees and the path before him. The path wound its way deeper into the forest, and as Elias walked, he lost track of time. The moon hung high in the sky, its light casting long shadows across the ground. But there was no sense of urgency, no rush to reach the end of the path. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind, and Elias found himself falling into a kind of trance. His footsteps slow and measured, his mind drifting like the current of a river. After what felt like hours, though time seemed to move differently in this place, Elias came upon a clearing. The trees here were taller, their branches arching high above, forming a natural cathedral of silver leaves. In the center of the clearing stood a single, massive tree, its trunk thick and gnarled with age, its bark the color of deep twilight. Its branches stretched wide, and hanging from one of the lowest limbs was a small, delicate mirror, much like the one that had appeared in his garden. Elias approached the mirror, his heart beating softly in his chest. The mirror's surface was smooth, reflecting the light of the moon and the silvery leaves of the trees. But as he drew closer, he realized that, like the larger mirror in his garden, this one too held something more. Within its reflection, Elias saw a figure, an old man, much like himself, sitting by a river. The man's face was lined with age, his hair silver like the leaves of the trees, and his expression was one of deep thought and longing. The scenes shifted, and Elias saw memories from his own life reflected back at him. He saw himself as a young man, full of energy and ambition, traveling across distant lands, seeking adventure and discovery. He saw the friends he had made, and lost, the places he had once called home, the loves and the heartaches, the triumphs and the failures. Tears welled in Elias's eyes as he watched his life unfold before him. But instead of sadness, there was a deep sense of peace. The mirror wasn't showing him these things to make him long for the past or regret the choices he had made. It was showing him the beauty of his life, the fullness of his experiences, the joy and the pain, the love and the loss. All of it was a part of him, a part of his journey. And as he stood there, lost in the memories, the mirror began to glow softly, the light growing brighter and warmer until it enveloped him completely. Elias closed his eyes, letting the warmth wash over him, and when he opened them again, he was no longer standing in the forest. He was back in his garden, the soft grass beneath his feet and the cool night air brushing against his skin. The large mirror in the center of the garden was gone, replaced by the familiar sight of the moon reflecting in the small pond near his cottage. Elias stood for a moment, taking in his surroundings. Everything was as it had been before, quiet, still. But something within him had changed. The weight of time, the quiet ache of solitude had lifted. He felt lighter, as if a great burden had been eased from his shoulders. As he made his way back to his cottage, Elias felt a deep sense of contentment. The mirror, whatever it had been, had shown him not only his past, but his present, the quiet joy of the life he had built here in this valley. And in that life, he had found peace. That night, Elias slept deeply, his dreams filled with the gentle rustle of silver leaves and the soft glow of moonlight. And when he awoke the next morning, the world seemed brighter, as if the veil of mist that had once shrouded the valley had lifted. For the rest of his days, Elias lived with a quiet happiness, knowing that the mirror had given him a gift far greater than any adventure or discovery. It had shown him the beauty of his own life, and in that beauty, he had found a lasting peace. And so, beneath the light of the moon, the valley remained as quiet and serene as ever, its mysteries held close to those who sought them with open hearts. And so, as Elias found peace and gratitude in his journey through the mirror of the moon, we too can reflect on the beauty in our own lives. Just as he discovered that serenity lies not in far-off adventures, but in appreciating the quiet moments, may you find comfort in the simple joys around you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Fairy Tale Nights. I hope the story brought you peace and helped ease you into a restful sleep. If you enjoyed this tale and would love to hear more, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue sharing these calming stories with you. You can continue listening to the soothing music for a little while longer, allowing yourself to relax even more. Sleep well, dream sweetly, and hopefully we'll see you soon again. Sweet dreams and good night.